Let me introduce this auspicious panel here. To my left is Bob Pick. He's the Global Deputy CIO at Tokio Marine. Next to him is Sandeep Maraja. I never say it right, Sandeep. So he's the Managing Director of Microsoft. And on the far end is Manish Shah, our President and Chief Product Officer at Majesco. So what we're going to talk about today is GenAI, how it's revolutionizing and optimizing insurance, something that is dramatically needed in today's insurance space. So to get us started, I am actually going to show a video as I pose the first question. So Manish, it's been 5 months since we had our product council with all of our customers, and we had a discussion on the potential of GenAI. But the pace, even since May, has been astounding, and it's unbelievable. So let's talk about that pace of change, what's happening in the advancement of GenAI, and what's the impact for insurance. So talk a little bit about that and what's kind of happening on the screen.
Yeah, I mean, very, very exciting time to be here. Generative AI, as the name suggests, it's the first time in our history that there is something that is as artificial can actually generate the content. And that content's been generated through the language, through actions, and so many other means. And there are so many cool use cases that you can imagine on that. However, from the insurance perspective, as what we saw is to bring the simplicity and to tame the complexity at every single user interaction points. I think that interaction points with agents, with our customers are so critical. And having those interaction points optimized, simplified, was a really the focus area for us as we started out in this journey early on. We think that not only it will just improve and bring the efficiencies and productivity, I think in general, it will improve the quality of the service. It will improve the experience of the service. And that's why we started out in terms of focusing on some of those use cases where whether it is an inquiring about your policy, which you all know, it's not that easy to understand, but finding that information quickly, ability to serve the customers quickly, giving some of the self-serve capabilities, these are all sort of part of the game. But when we ran the focus group, right after our product council, what we found very interesting is that we didn't find with any other technology is our focus group said they will not give away the Gen AI. 70% of the users were not ready to give up once they start using it. It's like, okay, if we once get a co-pilot and we know how to use this thing, that makes our life so simple, even for those use cases. Now, fast forward from that, the technology evolves quite rapidly, as you all are aware of it. It has gone to voice, it has gone to vision, now it is going into the reasoning side of it. So we took this as an opportunity, saying, how do we get this unstructured, like what you're seeing on the screen, is a use case where we're getting thousands of invoices on a daily basis from vendors for the repairs or for medical bills and so forth. And having a co-pilot kind of Gen AI, which is able to extract and read that and reason with this thing and provide the information saying that this is how you can quickly do the payment, that can save a significant amount of time. So we think that Gen AI is more than just a chatbot. I think it has moved up in its role from being an advisable to an actionable by means of co-pilots and so on.
So Sandeep, I mean, since almost 2 years ago when all of a sudden ChatGPT came out and Microsoft came out with Copilot, the development has just been dramatic, and it's continued to be dramatic. And I think the pace is astounding people. Kind of talk about that and the impact and the value for insurance.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about 2 years. I was just thinking about 5 months back when we were in a similar panel and the changes that have happened. So there are a few things to me that are really salient. The first is UX, the user experience. One of the original sins of ChatGPT was putting chat on top of these large foundational models, right? And that opened up a whole world of possibilities that we were not honestly thinking of at that point in time, right? So the user experience continues to evolve and evolve rapidly, right? So now, for example, you can use Microsoft Pages, right? That's a very different way for you to interact with OpenAI. You can use Canvas. Google has come up with, Notebook LM. So the user interface itself is changing, and it continues to evolve. And that means, for me, newer and better use cases are going to be coming on, right? So that's number one. The second has to do with the fact that the models, as we have always seen, right? The models have been becoming better. They have more capabilities. Manish, you talked about them becoming multimodal. Now we are also coming towards reasoning models, right? So OpenAI's O1 preview, and think about this. Now these models can do something very similar to what humans do, right? Like we have system 1 thinking and system 2 thinking. So those capabilities are coming. That's going to open up a whole new world of possibilities. And then the thing that gets me most excited is, the stats that Manish, you just shared, right? The report that just came out, 10x improvement. That's something that is absolutely amazing. And on top of it, you're getting 10x, 20x improvement by using this technology. And your users still do not want to leave. They want more. That's what gets me most excited.
Yeah, it's really the first time in probably decades that we've seen real operational improvement possibilities ahead of us. So Bob, one of the things that we talked about ahead of time is some of the foundational shifts that's kind of happening with GenAI. And you termed this term, it's become an omni-utility. Kind of talk about that and why it is impacting everything kind of that we're looking at from an insurance perspective.
Sure thing, yeah. The idea of a digital omni-utility is something that kind of occurred to me a couple of weeks ago as we were talking about this and preparing for this. Think of an omni-utility as something that is ubiquitously available, ubiquitously useful. Not to be over dramatic, but like a writing system, an alphabet, is an omni-utility. And when you're using it, you don't think, oh, I am engaging with a writing system. You just read and write and make it happen. And the same is happening. It's not done yet, but it's happening very much with generative AI. And I would argue that generative AI has also rekindled great interest in classic AI as well. And the combination of the two is really becoming powerful. But generative AI is already, 2 years of commercial use, is already getting embedded to the point where we don't even know it's generative AI that's operating in the background. And this goes to Manish's comment about moving from advisory use of generative AI to actionable use, and I would also indicate that it's not just advisory to actionable, but it's promptless actionable. And what I mean is not that there isn't a prompting issue in the back end, but the end user does not have to craft a prompt. That use of generative AI is presenting hyper-relevant information at the right time, like with Microsoft Copilot, Majesco's Copilot, other platforms that are out there. It's using generative AI in a user-passive way to present hyper-relevant information or to pre-fill data or do research or validate things in a way that even just 2 years ago, where we're all playing around with ChatGPT and others like ChatGPT, we're issuing our prompt and it gives us an answer and we get all excited. Or we go to DALL-E and we issue a prompt and it gives us a picture and we get excited. Now, as an end user, I'm not even issuing prompts. Generative AI is operating in the background. So it creates a promptless interaction with generative AI that I think is very useful. And when you go promptless, meaning it's now passive use as an end user, that is the beginnings of it becoming an omni-utility, where it's just embedded, it's just there. And in the future, I would expect, aside from technologists, just general end users, we won't even be thinking, I am using generative AI. It'll just be part of whatever system or service that we're using. Now, as technologists, we're always going to look for those cues and keys. But whenever it gets to a point where the general population isn't even aware it's using general AI, that means it's fully embedded, and that's the essence of an omni-utility.
Yeah, and I think there's another aspect that, Manish, you've talked about, in that Gen AI is the new UI. Kind of talk about why that is and what your perspectives are.
Yeah, listen, so I think everybody kind of, as the name suggests, artificial intelligence, I call it augmented intelligence from my perspective, because I think it's as artificial, but I think that it has to work with the human in the loop. But the fundamental thing is it's not just about intelligence. I think what you said that you can do with that intelligence. If you are able to embed that intelligence into your user interactions, in your workflows, I think you can radically, dramatically change the user experience. And I think that will impact your user interface, that how are you going to plan for your user interfaces for your end users. See, there is going to be countless solutions. There are already too many on the AI on the world. And I think very soon there's going to be countless solutions. I think the problem that we're all going to deal with this thing is how do you put them to use at the point of sale, at the point of services, where the action happens. And the second thing that is yet not fully comprehended by most is There is no such thing as one AI. Like there is generative AI, as Bob said, there's classic AI, which means that there are going to be machine learning models, there are going to be proprietary machine learning models, there are insurance-specific models. The question really is that it's not something that you can rely on an individual model or all these models to work independently, but saying that how do you bring them together to collaborate to really tackle on some of the complex tasks that our industry has. And that's where the whole embedding aspect, where my favorite thing is that the brain is part of myself, the brain is part of our body, it's not a separate organism, which means that intelligence has to be a part of the system that is it that you're trying to make it intelligent. And you embed that into it. You make sure that you have sufficient collaboration across the models. Another example, in a layman's term, I would say, is when we all work in companies, we go into the meetings, we have teams. Why do we have teams? Because each of the team member brings a unique set of skills that we need to handle that project. And this is no different than when you consider AIs that way, that each of these models, whether are foundational LLM models or whether there is a property risk scoring model, or there could be any other different types of models that are out there. They all are valuable, but the value exponentially gets higher if you can find a platform where those models can actually collaborate with each other using the reasoning, where when to invoke which, and then bring in that insight into an action. And that will drive this thing. So an example of that is coding process. Like we all are very familiar with coding process. We heard 15 minutes can save you 15% or more, and that was a great statement, I think, 20 years ago or 15 years, I don't remember exactly what it was. But it still requires a tons and tons of data that is to be entered. And why is that in this day and age? I think that it can be far better if you can follow this approach where in your coding system, it is already integrated, embedded. If you have multiple models which can actually underwrite as well as create the generative actions and present you something, you can be very close to almost a touchless code.
Yep.
And that to me is the best UI, because at the end of the day, I think that people want to do and walk in the park and play video games and do whatever that they enjoy doing it, not necessarily, having a very fancy screens for insurance services and sales. So the best UI from my perspective is no UI, and I think AI can help assist that.
Yep. I'm going to show another video here on coding for personal auto while we move into the next session. Bob, we were just talking about, you and I, as we're sitting in the green room, we were talking about democratization of data, that is so needed in this industry. That really ties into democratization of AI. And how important is that going to be for insurers to kind of prepare and respond? And they can't wait very long because it's going so fast.
Absolutely, but I think also, as Sandeep and I were talking about this a little earlier, insurance does not give itself enough credit, and we are not given enough credit for the technology innovations and the pace of innovation that we have actually adopted in the industry over the last, I'd say especially the last 10 years. And the adoption of AI and generative AI is actually a great example of that. Sitting here 2 years ago and ChatGPT goes out commercial, everyone who wasn't aware that that was happening in the background, and I'm among them, surprised. It's wonderful. They say that any science which is sufficiently advanced can appear as magic, and that sort of is in that vein. Everyone's jaws dropped, and we're trying to figure out what was happening. But what didn't happen is insurance put their hands in their pockets and just waited. What happened was every carrier, every MGA out there, every solution partner dove in. What does this mean? How can it help? What isn't it? Where's the risk? All those sorts of things. And it created a very innovative soup, the likes of which I certainly had not seen in the industry. But the cool thing is that the insurance industry was more or less prepared to be able to walk through safely that innovation curve as quickly as anything I've ever seen without going too far too quick. We are regulated, we are handcuffed, and the purpose of the industry is to help manage and mitigate risk. We are never just going to slam in some new tech and call it a day. We can't do that, and we shouldn't do that. However, there's a lot of distance between don't slam it in and don't try anything at all. And I think the pace of experimentation and adoption, both on an end user basis, hopefully safely and following all the guidelines that we want them to, but also on an enterprise technology digital perspective and with our partners, was tremendous. And so now we see these things, as Manish was saying, it's embedded in a process already. We're not even 2 years in. The change rate is amazing, but I also credit, and I know this might be a little touchy, I also credit our regulators, because they have the early regs that have come out, many of them, quite honestly, I think they're not bad. They're pretty on point. They're definitely paying attention. And for the most part, they're trying to work with the industry, recognizing that this is a wave that is happening. There's no putting it back in the bottle. And they want to help make sure we're keeping it safe, and we should. They should do that, and we should pay attention to that. But they're not necessarily in a process of saying, no, stop. They're working with us. And I think that's a key differentiator versus some other circumstances in the past where the regulators have either said nothing, and that causes us in insurance and any regulated industry to pull back. When we don't know where we might get hit, we pull back. In this case, there are enough clues that are coming out in drafts that we have enough to work with so we can go forward and go forward safely. But I'll say as a final statement, for Tokio Marine Group, and I don't think we're alone among our carrier partners out there, we expect that most of the AI that we're going to be consuming is going to be delivered by somebody else's platform. It's going to be Majesco, it's going to be Microsoft, or any one of a number of other great partners. We're not going to be building it in-house. The beauty is we've moved in 2 years from a collection of piece parts that was generative AI to now it's products. And so we don't necessarily have to have a crazy stack of engineers to select a vector database and figure out a RAG scheme and deal with chunking, because it's been productized by our partners. The pace of that is amazing, and I think that's very helpful to us in the carrier.
Yeah. And Sandeep, what's your kind of view as to this pace and also just the benchmarks that you're beginning to see? You know, obviously you work with insurance, but you're seeing some other things, and particularly, you know, the strong partnership that we have. You know, those benchmarks are something.
Yeah, I want to also key in on something that, you know, Bob talked about. We have been very purposeful and listening to the industry and making sure that we are building into our platform the guardrails that will allow this innovation, right? So, you know, that's a different way in which we have engaged in this technology cycle, right? We have people who understand insurance. We have people who understand regulation. We have people, obviously, who know our technology and our platform. So those guardrails, I think, were really, really important at the beginning, right? Making sure we all got comfortable, right, with what were the risks that are there, what are the mitigants we can put, and what are the mitigants that, honestly, the end users always have to own, right? So that, I think, was something that really helped build the foundation on which we have seen the tremendous pace of change that we're talking about. So talking about some statistics, I mean, one thing I would suggest is please check out the Microsoft Work Trend Index. There's some really good telemetry that's coming out. It's also, we've been doing it since 2022, so you can see how things have been changing. And I can cite off a bunch of statistics, but I want to just share one thing that just came out recently. There's a National Bureau of Economic Research working paper on GenAI, and there were a few things that came out. One, the pace of adoption for GenAI is twice that of earlier phases. If you look at same stage where the internet was, where the PC was, this is twice as fast. So the adoption is just amazing. Like almost 39.8% of US working age adults are using GenAI, either at home or at work. Now, where the opportunity is, I think all of us, most of us are using GenAI more at home for our personal use than at work. So we see the potential. We just have to make sure that, you know, we get comfortable in taking that and applying it to our work and our workflows, because that's where the value will come, right? And honestly, where we need to get to is what we've been talking about. The UI should be just, you know, not be transparent anymore. You don't have to worry about it. It's there. It's a colleague that sits with you and helps you.
And Manish, benchmarks have been something you and I have been talking about, and we just put out a press release today, benchmarking with some of our customers.
It's incredible. I mean, you know, productivity is a huge ROI proof. At the end of the day, all this technology is great, but what is the business value that it is delivering? Yes, it has a lot of promise of delivering a lot more business value, but there is a tangible ROI that you can actually prove. As Bob mentioned, you know, as much as the technology is evolving, the productization is evolving. You don't have to build everything from yourself. Like from our perspective, like, okay, you know, NVIDIA is the infrastructure and Microsoft is a super scalar platform for us. And we're going to be the one who's actually productizing the insurance AI so that people can actually start using it. And as an insurance companies or any of the insurance participants, if you are having a data, build your own models so that you can even make it more intelligent. But our benchmarks are incredibly amazing that the amount of savings that we are seeing that can actually help improve the needle on your operating model, on your profitability, and eventually an ROI.
So with that, we're at time. I'd just like to remind people a couple of things. We have a part 2 luncheon that all 3 of these gentlemen will be a part of at 12:30 to 2 in Mandalay Ballroom. You're going to actually be able to see live the demos of all the use cases and the productivity improvements that can be achieved on both P&C and L&A&H core. And then I'd like to thank the panel for their great insight.